So 5 years ago, when Terminus started, it was really interesting for me because I was running marketing at Pardot. We got acquired by ExactTarget. Then we were acquired by Salesforce. So all of a sudden, I went from this 100 people tiny company to this 10,000 plus people iconic brand called Salesforce. Yeah. And I still remember the days where somebody said to me like, hey, look, how you run Pardot marketing? That's great. Maybe it's like 1x. But now that you're part of Salesforce, you got to think 100x. Wow. And what that really meant to me, Lisa and Tricia, was this idea that, oh my God, if this is what you need to think about, they were not talking about budget. They were not talking about more resources. They were talking about the way Mark Benioff thinks, the way he thinks about partnership, the way he thinks about launching something, the way he thinks about community and all those things, right? So to me, when we started Terminus, I found myself in a similar situation where we're based in Atlanta, not a lot of funds, first-time founders. So really didn't you want to stack all the odds that were against us. This is like a recipe for disaster.
I wouldn't bet for you in Vegas. No,
yeah, right? Not a place. But then we realized that the only way we can break through this is by actually going after the problem, not the product. So in the early days, we decided not to fall in love with our product and fall in love with the problem we saw. So I love when, Tricia, you talked about when you started, the organization started with this idea of helping people do work remotely in a better way. I think that's the problem that you're solving, and the products could be anything. So we literally just did that. We started this community called Flip My Funnel, and that just blew and allowed us to grow really big. So I have a saying that's like, without a community, you're simply a commodity. I mean that, and I feel like every organization, every person listening, you got to think about the community that's around you, an individual community that's around you, that you are around hanging out, or as a product company, like whatever, your community is going to be your brand. Your community is going to define who you are. So without a community, you're a commodity. And I feel like we stumbled on that as an idea and just led that to our growth. And now 5 years later, we're about 250 people based in Atlanta, Indy, and San Francisco, over 1,000 customers. And what I feel the most passionate about, which is where we started, I feel like now is the time for everybody to just jump in for whatever talent they got. It's a beautiful time.
Yeah, I love that. And I like how you're talking about community, right? So let's dive deeper into that now, since we're just going deep from the beginning. Many of our listeners are not in the technology space. So they're not going to get a huge lump sum of money, right? That's just not something that's going to come to them. And most of them are just really leading small businesses. So one of the reasons we're grateful to have you on the podcast is to have that you're talking about a marketing strategy that really anyone can use to build their business in any industry. So with Flip My Funnel, you started a movement and built a community among B2B marketers. Those are marketers who sell their products or services to other businesses. So why did you start building that community? I mean, I think you touched on it a little bit, but let's go deeper into that.
I think when organizations want to launch a product, the reality is simply this. Somebody right around the corner, and that's the paranoia in me, is like, I feel like somebody right now, right around the corner in their shed, is actually building a better, faster, cheaper product than we got.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
That's reality, right? Yeah.
That's the reality that you have to live with. And that's a paranoia. That's a healthy paranoia. I feel like to have is to make sure that you got to always be, as Jeff Bezos might say, your day one operator. Like you got to think like it's always day one, because day two is death.
Right. You're either growing or declining. Yeah. You're doing one or the other. You're evolving or you're becoming obsolete.
Absolutely. I think that along those lines, it's almost like your touch point with your customers today, with your audience today, your future customers today. Either, to Tricia, your point, you're building your brand, or you're literally crushing your brand, right? Because your touch point matters. So for us, as a first-time founders in building and being in Atlanta, we just felt like we want to build an entirely new category. And that's a very different stage. So when you think about it, hearing like, oh, well, a lot of people are listening and saying, well, we're not that big. We're not Salesforce. We're not.
Right.
We were in the same exact bucket 5 years ago. We're not Salesforce. We were not any of those people. We're like 3 founders in Atlanta who never really did much in trying to build stuff. Like we had jobs and other things. And what I realized is that that's a false statement that we tell ourselves, that we can't go that big. We are not there yet. The reality is everybody starts somewhere. And for us, where we started was that we are going to fall in love with the problem. We're going to figure out how we know that this is the real problem to solve is by creating a community, which is going to allow us to find problem market fit.
I like that.
Very different. Very different market fit. Like, have you heard about these two terms, like product market fit and problem market fit? Yeah.
I love it. I love that.
I didn't know that there was a difference in those two. So that's quite eye-opening.
Yeah, it is a huge difference when you think about a product market fit, as a lot of small businesses, early stage companies would think, well, I got to sell to 20 companies, and if they buy or people, then I know I have a product market fit. Great. But do you know if there's a problem market fit, which essentially help you understand that there's enough market for you to sell in the future? So community is a great way to figure out if the problem exists. So for example, when we started Flip My Funnel, we invited the top 50 marketing and sales leaders to come and speak at our conference, and we made it open. And what we realized is that every time we did that event, there would be hundreds, and now over 1,500 people show up to that conference. Just physically and virtually over 10,000 people. So we knew that we hit on a problem.